What's up? It's me, the Geeky American Otaku. Welcome to the next episode of 15-Minute Game Show Reviews, and welcome to my first ever review from my new home in Meridian, Idaho. It's been a couple of months since I made a video, but now that I'm settled in my new home, I decided it's time I got back on the wagon. Also, this new review is about a game show that could have fallen into the lost media category, but it's about to be seen on TV for the first time in over 40 years. And as former news anchor Warner Wolf would say, let's go to the videotape.
Close calls. Narrow escapes. Split-second decisions. And $25,000 in cash. A combination guaranteed to make you say. And now here's the star of our show, Tom Kennedy.
Welcome back. We're all tickets. And we play with two bright people.
No, you are not high. That is the intro to an actual game show, and it's a favorite among game show fans. The name may be a little hard to pronounce, and the rules may seem like the TV game show version of Calvin Ball. Look that up on TV Tropes. But this show is something else. But it's a good something else. Whew! Debuted on CBS on April 23rd, 1979, and ran until May 30th, 1980. The show was the brainchild of Jay Wolpert. A native of the Bronx, New York, Jay was a champion on the original Jeopardy with the late Art Fleming in 1969 and won that year's Tournament of Champions. He later began his game show production career in Canada with Dan Enright before working with Chuck Ferris and later Goodson Todman Productions. And while at the latter, he became a producer for The Price is Right from its debut in 1972 until 1978, and he created the short-lived CBS game show Double Dare, not to be confused with the more well-known Nickelodeon version, hosted by the late Alex Trebek. He later left Goodson Todman in 1979 and formed his own production company and created other game shows that, while not having long lives, are popular among game show fans. After Whew ended, his other titles included Hitman, Blackout, Rodeo Drive, Shopping Spree, which is his most successful game show, and Wait Till You Have Kids. In 1994, he ended up returning to Mark Goodson Productions and produced the short-lived New Price is Right, starring Young and the Restless star Doug Davidson, and produced the 1998 reboot of Match Game starring Michael Berger. He also wrote the script for the 2002 version of The Count of Monte Cristo starring QAnoner Jim Caviezel, and received credit for all of the Pirates of the Caribbean films starring Johnny Depp. At one point, he was a consultant on the syndicated version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, so Jay is still very active in TV to this day. The host was the one and only Tom Kennedy. Born in Louisville, Kentucky in 1927 as James Nars, Tom adopted his stage name to avoid confusion with his older brother Jack Nars, who is also a seasoned radio and TV personality. Tom hosted many game shows over nearly 3 decades, with his biggest hits being You Don't Say, Split Second, and especially the 1970s version of Name That Tune. Other shows hosted by Tom include It's Your Bet, Break the Bank, To Say the Least, Password Plus, Body Language, and a nighttime version of The Price is Right, and finally, Wordplay. Tom also had acting cred and appeared in several TV shows, most notably in a 1986 episode of Hardcastle and McCormick, where he played a game show host / murderer. Tom retired from hosting in 1989, but he made several TV appearances afterwards, including Game Show Week on Hollywood Squares in 2003. Tom passed away in October of 2020 at the age of 93. The announcer was Rod Roddy in his first ever game show announcing gig. Born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1937, Rod was a DJ in Buffalo and then in Dallas, where he hosted Rod Roddy's Hotline, where the controversial topics made him a frequent target of death threats. He conducted a long-running on-air feud with an elderly woman dubbed Granny Hate by an earlier host, and she claimed to represent the local Ku Klux Klan.
What a bitch.
Anyway, in 1977, he became the narrator for the popular ABC sitcom Soap, which ran for 4 years. As I mentioned before, Whew was his first game show announcer job. He later announced for the Battle Stars, Love Connection, Hitman, which was hosted by Peter Tamarkin, who not long after that show's cancellation teamed up again for Press Your Luck, which ran from 1983 to 86 on CBS. And after the death of original announcer Johnny Olson in 1985, Rod Roddy would become the second announcer on CBS's long-running The Price is Right, where he later became famous for his brightly colored rainbow suits and sequin jackets, and made many appearances on camera. One of his last roles was as Mike the Microphone on Disney's House of Mouse. In 2001, Rod was diagnosed with colon cancer, but returned after surgery and chemotherapy just a month later. But sadly, in March 2003, he was diagnosed with breast cancer, and yes, it can happen to men, and he had to step down from behind the mic for good. It ultimately claimed his life in October of 2003, just before his 66th birthday. The gameplay worked like this. 2 contestants competed, one of which was almost always a returning champion. Now bear with me here, because it might get a little confusing. The game board consisted of 6 levels numbered 1 through 6, going from bottom to top. The first 5 levels had 5 boxes on them worth $10 to $50 in increments of 10, while level 6 had 3 boxes at the top worth $200, $350, and $500. Board would be given a different category for each round. The challenger had the option to take on the first round's board as the charger, or let their opponent handle it, and the challenger would be the blocker for that round. The roles would be switched in round 2. The charger would then go to a soundproof booth, while the blocker, who stood behind the red stop sign, would place 6 blocks on the board. They could place a maximum of 3 blocks on any of the first 5 levels, and only 1 block on the 6th. After the blocks were placed, the charger would come back on stage and stand behind the green arrow podium, and Tom would then yell, "Charge!" upon which the clock would start. The charger had 60 seconds to advance through all 6 levels by correcting bloopers, or factual statements in which one of the words had been changed to make a pun or a joke. Here's an example in the category of science.
3:10. In 1877, Thomas Alva Edison invented the first practical phonograph.
Of course, the correct answer here would be phonograph. The contestant started at level 1, and after choosing the box, if it had a blooper in it, Tom would read it out loud, and if the contestant correctly corrected the blooper, which was underlined, they moved on to the next level. If not, or if they took more than 3 seconds to answer, they would remain on that level and have to pick another box. If they uncovered one of the blocks, they would be stopped in their tracks for 5 seconds, which would then be counted down by Tom, the audience, and usually the blocker, after which play resumed. If the contestant failed on all 5 boxes on that level, it was exhausted, and they automatically moved on to the next one. If the charger believed that they were running out of time and they had not yet reached level 6, they could then yell for a long shot. Upon doing so, the clock was stopped and taken out of play. The charger immediately advanced to level 6. Tom then told the blocker to hide 1 secret block on the level by pressing one of 3 hidden buttons on their podium. Tom would then remind the charger that the blocker may have already placed a block there before the game started. The charger then selected 1 box and attempted to correct its blooper if one of them was hidden there. Anyway, the charger won the round either by clearing all 6 levels or successfully completing the long shot. If the charger ran out of time, or after calling a long shot, failed to correct the blooper or uncovered a block, the blocker won the round. The charger was not allowed to call a long shot after reaching level 6, or during the 5-second stoppage time for hitting a block, but they could do so any other time and even interrupt Tom while he was reading a blooper. The players' roles were then switched for round 2. If a third round was needed, as it was the best 2 out of 3 match, Tom would then tell the contestants the category for the third round's board, and the champion would have the option of who was the charger and who was the blocker. Money was awarded to the contestant when, as the charger, they earned the amount for solving the blooper in the box they had chosen, and when, as the blocker, when their opponent uncovered one of the blocks they had placed in that box. The first contestant to win 2 rounds won the game, all the money that was gathered along the way, and advanced to the Gauntlet of Villains for a chance at $25,000. The runner-up, if not a former champion, received a consolation prize.
I now want you to meet 10 of the most nefarious, nasty, black-hearted brigands, villainous, vagrants, vicious villains who ever stood between Andrea Klein and her money, and here they are! They're still here. Let's go get them, Andrea. They're still here. Right there. How do you like that? They're still there.
Yeah.
And they're just as fearsome looking as ever.
This is by far one of the more unique bonus rounds in game show history. The contestants stood at the beginning of a path lined with 10 wooden caricatures of stereotypical cartoon villains, each one with an arm raised as the barrier. The goal, as before, was to correct the bloopers in the allotted time. The champion had a base time of 60 seconds, plus one additional second for every $100 they won in the front game. So if they won $650, they'd have a total of 66 seconds. Okay, the gauntlet began when the bell sounded and Tom read the blooper. If the contestant was right, they won $100. The villain's arm lowered so the contestant could move on to the next villain. If wrong, or if they failed to answer in 2 seconds, the correct answer would appear on a screen embedded in the villain's chest, which Tom called
their little individual telly-belly.
If the contestant got past all 10 villains before time ran out, they won an additional $25,000 and retired as champion, as that was CBS's winnings limit at the time. If they failed, the villains taunted the contestant. They also did that when the contestant won, because duh, they're evil. The contestant remained as champion, and they would play another match. Originally, they could attempt the gauntlet 7 times, but it was later reduced to 5, upon which the champion was forced to retire. Oddly enough, the villains all had names. They were, from start to finish, Alphonse the Gangster, Bruno the Headsman, Mr. Van Louse the Landlord, Nero the Fiddler, Count Nibbleneck the Vampire, Frank and his little friend Stein, Kid Rotten the Gunslinger, Jeremy Swash the Pirate, Dr. Deranged the Mad Scientist, and Lucretia the Witch. On November 5th, 1979, in an attempt to increase the show's ratings, Whew changed format to accommodate the addition of celebrities to the game. Originally, it was meant to be for just 3 weeks, but the change instead became permanent, and the show adopted the title of Celebrity Whew to reflect the change, and it remained this way until the show's cancellation. Anyway, each contestant was paired with one of the 2 celebrities, and they both took turns charging. They shared blocking duties, with each of them placing 3 blocks when it was their turn. The rules were otherwise unchanged, except toward the end of the series, if one of the teams was able to win by sweeping the first 2 boards, they got to play the 3rd board unopposed for bonus money and bonus round time, with the blocks placed randomly, although Tom stated the villains were the ones placing the blocks. Presumably, the contestant only won the extra money if they successfully cleared the board, and this ended up making Whew a self-contained half-hour show. And in the Gauntlet of Villains, on Celebrity Whew, one member of the team took the first half of the gauntlet, the other took the second half. Anyway, that's how Whew was played. Now, I'm going to grade it. This is probably one of the more bizarre game shows ever made, but that doesn't mean it's bad. The reason most people might not remember this show was because CBS aired it in the time slot which belonged to Match Game 79, which moved to late afternoons. Its network competition was restricted to NBC's daytime lineup, as ABC did not air any network programs until 11 a.m. Eastern. Whew did particularly well among children during the summer of '79, which was an audience that it lost when those children went back to school that fall. This audience, though, which became part of Generation X, is what gave the show its later cult following despite its absence from reruns. From its premiere, Whew first went up against All-Star Secrets on NBC, starring Bob Eubanks, until that show was canceled. The Peacock then relocated Hollywood Squares, which the network had been shuffling around for some time by 1979. It aired in 3 separate time slots that year alone. Both programs would face each other for head-to-head for the remainder of Whew's run, and of course Hollywood Squares beat it in the ratings, although NBC canceled it, and Chain Reaction and High Rollers 1 month later for David Letterman's ill-fated daytime talk show. However, thanks to a contestant named Randy Amasia, the show found a new audience thanks to his fan website and later on YouTube. In fact, I myself have seen many episodes on YouTube and have become a fan of the show. Legendary game show host Wink Martindale has posted several episodes on his YouTube channel. In fact, thanks to both Wink and producer John Ritchie Jr., will be seen on television for the first time in 41 years on the Buzzr network. Go to buzzrtv.com to see where you can find the channel in your area. The network's feed also live streams on its website, and it can be found on several streaming apps. As for the gameplay, well, like I said, TV tropes basically described it as Calvin Ball from Calvin and Hobbes. The rules can be somewhat confusing to first-time viewers. But believe it or not, they're pretty easy to figure out after a while. One player is on offense, charging up the board, while the other plays as defense as the blocker, and the main roles switch in the second round, which is done in certain sports like football. Anyway, the long shot can be a last-ditch effort to save yourself. Of course, the odds of uncovering a block resulting in a loss increases to 2-1, and if you don't know the answer to the blooper, you're screwed. As for the bloopers themselves, well, it's interesting to find out what the word is supposed to go there. What word is supposed to go there, and they can be funny sometimes. And the Gauntlet of Villains is probably the most creative bonus round ever. And does that mean it's not nerve-wracking, especially with $25,000 on the line? When it comes to hosting, Tom Kennedy showed that he indeed was one of the best in the biz. He can read a blooper and not be all hammy about it. And as for the celebrity version, well, like Bullseye or Hot Potato, it was a desperate and failed attempt to boost the ratings for the show by the network. But unlike the former two, where celebrities made themselves the center of attention and detracted from the gameplay, the addition of the celebrities didn't hurt the show that much. In fact, the gameplay remained the same, and in my opinion, improved when the show became self-contained half-hour where the matches didn't straddle between episodes. And the stars ended up being helpful to the contestants since they played the game along with them. That being said, in spite of its weird name and bizarre gameplay and being bizarre in general, was a fun show. Even if you can't pronounce it right. I'm sure I've screwed it up a few times myself. So, it gets a solid B. I would have given it a B+, but I don't do pluses or minuses because, as we all know,
minuses are made up!
Now, we'll talk about how I'd revive the show if I had the chance. The show would be played the same as before, but with a lot more money up for grabs. I'd also make it so the show felt more like a video game with the villains coming to life. The board would now have the boxes on the first 5 levels worth $100 to $500, and the boxes on level 6 would be worth $1,000, $1,500, and $2,500. The first to win 2 games would play the Gauntlet. The third round would still be played, and much like on the last few weeks of the series in 1980, the winner would face the board by themselves, with the blocks placed randomly by one of the villains for additional money and more time for the Gauntlet. As before, only the winner would keep all the cash won, but I'd still give a $1,500 consolation prize for the runner-up. Now, in the Gauntlet, the contestant would get 60 seconds as a base time, plus they get 1 extra second for every $1,000 won in the front game. For every villain defeated in the Gauntlet, the contestant would get an additional $1,000. Getting past all 10 would bring the player's total to $50,000. As for host, my choice would be Frank Nicotero of Street Smarts fame. As for announcer, I would go with Rod Roddy's successor on The Price is Right, the one and only Rich Fields. Anyway, that's it for my most recent episode of 15-Minute Game Show Reviews. I'm going to have another video out soon. Until then, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm the Geeky American Otaku. And, well, you guys take care of yourselves, okay? And each other. We want to get out of this funk that we're in and start having fun again, all right? Ciao.
Deep hurting.